What's up, friends? Well, today I've got an Elvis story for you that I really don't think gets told enough, and I'm going to talk about an individual that worked for Elvis that you probably never even heard of. But I've been thinking a lot since the movie has come out. Over the years, there have been a lot of stories made of was Elvis a racist or not, and I think those are just silly things because, there's no evidence that he ever was bigoted or a racist or anything of any kind. And Priscilla and others have talked about just how silly of a notion that is. But for some reason in the new film, Baz Luhrmann went to great pains to show that Elvis was not a racist at all. And but there's a couple of incidences here I want to talk about where he stuck up for an African American gentleman that worked for him, whose name was Albert Clark, and probably a name that you've never heard of at all. But there's some pretty interesting things around him. So Mr. Clark told of a story, and this was actually told through Uncle Vester when he was writing his book, Presley Speaks, of a time when Mr. Clark was standing there. I presume it was at Graceland, and there was other employees around, and this one individual would not shake Mr. Clark's hand or talk to him, and Elvis just basically went up to him and said, you work for me just like he does, you're going to respect him and shake hands with him, and so that made a huge impression on Mr. Brown. But then later on, there was another incident with him that actually Elvis confronted a bigoted act or a racist act, if you will, and actually knocked the man cold that was messing around with Mr. Clark. And I'm going to tell that story right now as well. And in order to kind of set the scene for that, this story happened in September of 1967, and that was a pretty quiet month for Elvis. He had just gotten done filming Speedway. They weren't quite ready to go start on Stay Away Joe yet. That was a couple weeks away from when this incident happened. He had just gotten back from Nashville from the recording the Guitar Man sessions on, I believe that was September 11th that they finished that up. And on September 17th is when this incident happened. And in order, though, let's go back even a little further than that, about 4 months before this, Mr. Clark had gotten ill and was going to be off for a while. So Vernon, who hired all of the employees at Graceland, had hired a man named Troy Ivy to be the gardener, because that's what Mr. Clark was. He worked in the yard and he did different things. And they had hired him to work there, but only going to be temporary while Mr. Clark was off on medical leave or whatever you want to call it. And so that ended. Mr. Clark came back to work, and Mr. Ivy was let go, and he wasn't real happy about it. So according to the police report and the newspaper clippings at the time, and I'll post a couple of those up here, pictures of those, so you can see them as well. Mr. Ivy was probably full of a little bit of liquid courage, and he came back to Graceland. He went and talked to Vernon first, and Vernon basically told him, hey, bug off, you knew this was a temporary job. Well, Mr. Ivy wasn't happy because they had given his job to a black man. He actually said that, according to newspaper articles and police reports. And so he stormed off. Well, then later on, he comes back to Graceland, and he's going to confront Elvis in the front gate. And that's where the rest of the story here happens. And this was told through reading police reports and newspaper articles at the time. So I guess it was about a half hour, and this is according to the police report that Elvis filed, about a half hour after Mr. Ivy had been talking to Vernon, he does go to Graceland to confront Elvis at the gate. So Elvis comes down because there's a disturbance. He's being belligerent, Mr. Ivy is, and so on and so forth. And he takes a swing at Elvis. Well, Elvis knocks him down with one punch. And later on, Mr. Ivy would tell his side of the story to the police and say, "Well, he hit me twice, but he didn't knock me down." Whatever, dude. I mean, Elvis probably did knock you out if he said he did. Knocked him down and took care of the situation. So these aren't things that a guy that would have any racist tendencies or bigoted things would ever do. So I always dismiss that stuff about Elvis, but these are a couple of instances where he stuck up for this man, and I saw a report later on. Nancy Rooks, who was a cook for Elvis and wrote a book, she talked about Mr. Clark in her book and how he was very upset and quiet at the funeral. He was there and said that he had lost one of his better friends in Elvis, and it's just another story of Elvis's humanity and how he loved and cared for everybody. He didn't care where you were from or if you were rich, poor, what color you were, and I thought that was an interesting story, and hope you enjoyed it. Please like this video. If you do, hit the thumbs up. Subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button. Click on the bell so you could be notified when we upload more content. And until next time, I say thank you and TCB.